Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for attending the press conference following the release of the critical incident debriefing that took place last Thursday night, March 5th, 2026 at 54 Minnesota. We took an additional day in an attempt to reach out to the subject's family to be able to present the video that we have since released to you and will be releasing to the public. We have not had successful attempts to be able to reach out or to make contact with any of those family members. So in the interest of transparency and allowing the public to see and know what happened, we're going to release that video this afternoon. As you have had the opportunity to see, officers had some differing information, and when they arrived on scene, they then took everything into consideration, ultimately attempted to call the subject out, breached the door, attempted to call him out again after that. After verbal commands and an unsuccessful taser deployment, the subject charged the officers over a span of about 8 feet, and one officer fired 2 rounds into the subject. The subject ultimately died in surgery at ECMC, and the investigation is still ongoing. Our homicide unit is working in conjunction with the AG's office to be able to investigate everything that exactly did happen. So while I will share as much information as possible, there is some stuff that may still be unknown or I cannot share at this time. So at this time, if you have any questions, I'm available for your answers.
Commissioner, can you name the officer who deployed the taser and who fired the service weapon?
Sure. Officer Collins deployed the taser, and Officer Frank is the one who had to use the service weapon.
They were veteran officers, how many years?
I think they both have under 2 years on, sir.
We talked a bit last time we were here about the behavioral health unit not being available after 6 p.m. Has anything changed in that, or I know you said you were going to work on that. Any updates on that?
Sure. No, nothing has changed with that. You know, one of the things that I owed you guys for answers for the questions was training that the officers have. Since 2017, all officers in the academy, while they're going through the academy, have some sort of mental health awareness training. And in addition to that, 283 of our officers have received department training with respect to mental health. Where there's some confusion, whether if BHT would have been helpful in this situation, the problem is this is a man with a knife call, right? And ultimately, the video shows, and it's captured, the guy charged the officers with a knife, and a BHT situation would not help in this instance, right? Go ahead.
And the officer who kicked the door in, was that kind of standard protocol? I mean, he says, no more messing around or something like that.
Sure.
Kicks the door. Is that normal?
Sure. So that decision is made, right? And officers on scene have to make that decision. What is my actions going to do, or what is my inactions going to do? With the information that is originally being broadcasted to the officers that people are being held at knife point, take the commentary out of this. They did make entrance. They did not, or they breached the door, but they did not make entrance into the room, right? They attempted to call the subject out, which the subject chose. He made a decision to not put down the knives and charge the officers, right? So I understand the question about the commentary, but when you look at officers have this call, this radio call of, hey, 2 people are being held at knife point, and then the subject who is making the phone call is outside and he doesn't know what's going on. So that is a decision that those officers have to make. And when you look at some of the scenarios around the country from officers in action and people getting hurt, I understand why that decision was made.
Were people being held at knife point? Was that something that actually happened? In the video, we don't see that.
Sure. So how that all came about was there is a third party that reports that to AMR. There is people in the house that were being threatened by the knife, menacing. There is statements that we have obtained. People were in fear for their life. Maybe it wasn't a total accurate depiction from that radio run being held exactly at knife point, but they were being threatened by a subject with a knife, and they were in fear for their lives.
So were those the people
Yes, the residents of the house.
Yeah, because in the video, we just saw when they opened the door, the guy was in there, it looked like by himself.
Sure, and that goes back to the officers not having a full understanding of where every occupant in that house is, and even when the original caller is outside, there's points where there is question on where everybody is, because he's been outside. So in these situations, when you have multiple callers, sometimes a specific caller has more information than the other, and the officers were going off the information that they were provided.
Was the landlord the person? Was the house? You go ahead.
Was the landlord the person calling 911 3 times?
Yes.
And didn't he tell the officers on the way up that no one was being held at knife point at that time?
Sure, and then there's some more questions about where the people are located, and then as the officers are still talking, it's not totally clear to those officers where everybody in the house is.
Did the victim, did he randomly pick this house? What drew him to this house?
So he was renting a room in that house.
Just so I'm clear on, I guess, the communication trail here, AMR's reporting back to dispatch that people are being held at knife point, and that
Yes.
gets relayed to police.
Yes, so
And
that,
kind of triggers police to then
correct.
arrive to see.
So that's when we originally talked on Friday about the timelines and then the reports, AMR is ultimately reporting to our dispatch, which ups the priority level, which triggers the response that you see, because the officers are under the belief, because of radio dispatch, that they are going to a priority 2 knife call and people are being held. You know, the video opens up with officers going lights and sirens. They're checking the corners for each other to make sure that they can get there as fast as possible to ultimately try to help whoever's being held.
So I guess for our purposes, we could say nobody was actually being held at knife point.
Well, they were threatened and they're in fear for their
They
lives.
were feeling
Yes,
threatened by this person who had a knife,
yes,
but I guess nobody was actually being,
correct.
Yeah.
That's what our investigation is showing so far.
held at knife point.
Did the officers think that there were people inside the room with him?
So they were not sure. That's where,
Did they make any statements to you guys yet, or no?
no, they have not.
Just to be, also, to fix some information I think that was out there, AMR was never held at gunpoint, or at knife point?
No.
How big was the knife?
There was multiple ones, and that's in the video. I don't know off the top of my head, but he had one in each hand, and we had a tape measure next to each one of those,
Were they hunting knives or
just sharp knives.
In your opinion, did the officers do the right thing?
Yeah, I mean, we just were over there and we showed the 8-foot standoff distance, right? When somebody is charging you with a knife, you start with verbal commands, which were not adhered to. There was a less lethal option that was attempted to be deployed, and ultimately, sadly, the guy gets shot and he falls at their feet. There is no room for anything else, and there is decisions that are made by other people than the police in this situation.
Do you believe the use of force in this situation was justified?
Me personally, yes.
So it was about 2 minutes from when they knocked on the door to when they kicked in the door. Is there a standard for how long, or is that, do you think that was an appropriate amount of time to try to, the guy was in there yelling about call the FBI, and it seemed kind of, if the call was mental health, I mean, was these 2 minutes and kicking the door down the right way to go?
So what I can tell you, we're very fortunate that we have people that are always willing to put themselves in harm's way. They have information that people are being held. There is things that are unclear, and once they did breach the door, they did not enter that room. That should be taken into consideration. They were attempting to call him out, at which point we obviously see from the video that he has 2 knives and he charges, right? So the tactics and the decision-making are very easy to question as we're sitting in a nice, safe environment right now. These guys were in a very confined space with a guy charging at them with knives. I understand your question, but I would ask you to consider that they did not go into the room and they were trying to call him out. And then they did do verbal commands, and then they did attempt to use less lethal munitions or a less lethal device, and then ultimately deadly physical force was used.
Why 3 officers? Why was it a group of 3?
For
Like one used the taser, one used the gun, and one kicked in the door?
sure.
Was one solo that met the other 2 there, or how did 3 officers end up at the scene?
Sure, there was actually multiple officers there. That's what the camera shows. The 2 officers that deployed the taser and then discharged the firearm, they were partners. The lieutenant was in a typically lieutenant's ride by themselves, but there was also multiple other officers that were at the door.
That time between the taser deploying and then the officers having to decide to use deadly force, just kind of talk about, there are only a couple seconds there.
Sure.
So having to make that decision, that's something that you just got to do, the difficulty of maybe making that decision to use deadly force.
Sure, so the distance from where the subject stood up when he had those knives in his hands was approximately 8 feet, and from start of verbal commands to taser deployment to shot is right around 3 to 4 seconds. So that escalates very quickly, and sometimes you don't have those decisions or the luxury to make other decisions when somebody's charging at you in that capacity.
But for this incident, was it a normal night, if there is such a thing as a normal night, or was it busier than usual night?
It's steady, I mean, certain districts, it just depends on the call volume for the districts. E district is typically very busy almost every night, but sometimes maybe A district is the busiest one, just depending on call volumes and call types and what other calls officers are on, and maybe that has something to do with available cars. So I don't know if it was any different than a normal night.
So did AMR say, the dispatcher say that their crew is being held at that point, or that some people?
2 people are held at knife point.
And then the AMR dispatcher did not identify who that was?
Mm-mm.
Do situations like this make you evaluate the way you approach mental health calls within the department?
Well, again, the mental health aspect of this is kind of getting lost. With a subject that has knives and is charging at the police, this is not going to be treated like a mental health call. This is going to be treated like a subject with knives that is charging at the police. Again, with this subject specifically, we have had no interaction with him locally. So we would not have known his record. We would not have known to done outreach like we have done historically for people that we are aware of. So I understand your question, but again, I don't think it applies in this scenario.
Are there lessons learned from all this?
That's what I guess.
Over tragic incident?
Of course, everything, once all of the facts come out, things are reviewed, and we look at either policy or resources and how we can ultimately serve the community better, right? And some of that stuff is by going to community meetings, some of it's by debriefing the officers, some of it's looking at other agencies and their best practices.
3 officers are on paid administrative leave?
Yes, sir.
Still?
Yes, sir.
And that's who fires the gun, the taser,
Yes, sir.
and who's the third?
The lieutenant.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for your time.
Thank